In this segment, we're going to talk with Andee Martin from Wilton Manors. So let's talk a little bit about the history of Wilton Manors. I know you didn't live there back in the 90s, but your partner, Tony DeRiggi, who's known to everybody in Wilton Manors as Tony D, was one of the movers and shakers in the early days of the gay scene in Wilton Manors. And you at the time were living in North Carolina.
Correct.
Yet, even being in small town North Carolina, you knew about his bar, Chardees.
Yes. I was with a partner at the time, and we camped up in the mountains of North Carolina. And a group of us were sitting there talking about places to go, places to visit. P-Town came up, Palm Springs, and then Wilton Manors. And I, at the time, had not really heard anything about Wilton Manors. And they said, oh, the place you have to go when you go to Wilton Manors is Chardees. So, even in North Carolina, it had a good reputation, and, people visited when they were down here. Once I got down here, of course, the original Chardees was gone. But I've run into several people throughout the years, international, that, visit, and they're like, we missed the old Chardees, we missed the shows, the dinner club, all that. So it's got a rich history to it.
Yeah, and that location has a pretty storied history in and of itself. It was the Palms when Tony first bought it. And
Yes.
when he open it as the Palms, or did he immediately change the name? Do you know?
He immediately changed the name. He wanted to make sure he had his stamp on it. And he and Charlie Milkey, were partners at the time in business and also in real life. Tony was the front man. He was the showman, and Charlie was back of the house. Fantastic cook, great meals. So it was a great combination. And when they opened it, it was Chardees. The Char was Charlie, and the D was Tony.
And a lot of people don't realize, especially people who are either new to Wilton Manors or have never been there, but Chardees, it occupied the entire space that is right now the Eagle, which is over 8,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also been rumored to have the outdoor courtyard area that is behind the Courtyard Hotel, the outdoor patio area as well. That's a little bit debatable, but it was at least an 8,000 square foot bar. So this is not a tiny hole in the wall. And it's been a succession of gay bars over the years. It was Bill's Filling Station, which I think later changed their name to Bill's. It was The Wolf. It was Club Silver. It was Southern Nights. And it is now the Eagle Wilton Manors. So it's pretty much been a gay bar since Tony acquired it back in the 90s.
Correct. And as you were talking about the space, that space allowed for a lot of big shows when he had it. A couple of the biggest ones that he had Eartha Kitt perform, and I actually have video of that one.
Oh, very cool.
It's and just watching Eartha Kitt just perform and do her magic is amazing. And that space actually helped out because he did have the Glenn Miller Orchestra in there at one point.
Oh, wow.
They were on the stage, and they took up the entire dance floor. So that space did lead to some really big shows.
Fun fact, did you know that Bruce Valanche, the famous funny man out of LA, he actually wrote the words for Eartha Kitt's song, I Need a Man?
That I did not know.
So we have a Bruce Valanche connection there too. So yeah, Chardees had a great reputation. A lot of people talked about it, but was it primarily a men's bar, or do you know if there was a mixed clientele there?
He did have a mixed clientele. It did cater to not an older clientele, but there were I've met people throughout the years that said, they started going there in their early 20s. So it did have a good mix. And some lesbians that I've run into, they had gone to a lot of the shows.
Yeah.
They had there's some comedy stuff that was there, and of course, when Jennifer Holliday performed, so he did have a good mix.
Yeah, I've heard lots of great things about that bar, and I never went there either. So you're not the only one. I wish I had. In fact, the more I do this project, the more bars I find that I say, I wish I could have gone there.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen. So you and Tony were together for about 10 years. You moved to Wilton Manors, you said, in what, 2011?
Correct.
And of course, anybody who's been following the news knows that Tony passed away a couple of months ago.
Correct.
Which is a great loss to the community there. I cannot tell you how many people have told me, "Oh, you should have interviewed Tony D." And I said, "Well, I would have if I could have reached him at that time."
Yeah.
But at least we have you to bring some of his memories back for us. So that's much appreciated. After you moved to Wilton Manors and got settled in and you were with Tony, apparently you decided to dip your toe in the water of the Wilton Manors entertainment and restaurant scene, and you opened up a place called Andee's Creamery.
Correct.
What was the inspiration for that?
Tony was behind a lot of it. The store was the Hershey's ice cream store at the time, and he knew that the owner, who actually had a place up in Wilmington, Delaware, or actually not Wilmington, Rehoboth Beach. He had a place up there and also at Hershey's ice cream store. And he basically wanted to concentrate on the Delaware store. So Tony was like, "Do you want to open up an ice cream store?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" So I had a feeling he was going to eat most of my profits up, because he loved his ice cream. He ate it almost every day. So we ended up buying the store, and we remodeled a little bit inside. Had good clientele. We had great regulars that would come quite frequently. We're right across the street from Tropic, so a lot of people would have their dinner, come across the street for dessert. We kind of changed the menu a little bit. It'd always been an ice cream store. We brought in hot dogs. So we got a little bit more of a lunch crowd, which was good. So we had a good time doing it. And then we got some inquiries that, people wanted to actually purchase the store. And we kind of went back and forth. We didn't know if we wanted to let go of it. And then I think Tony had some ideas in his head down the line, which I didn't realize at the time. And he actually got an offer on the store, gave it to me on a business card, and he says, "We're taking it." So we ended up selling it, and it was supposed to become another ice cream store, but they ended up not opening it up at all. And then it actually transferred into Burgers and Beers.
Okay. And now, at least in part, another business a little bit down the drive has taken over at least the creamery part of your name. And there is now a Wilton Creamery that's located further up the drive.
Yes, they were open before we opened.
Oh, really?
Yes, they opened up, if I'm not mistaken, I think they opened in 2014. So they've been in business for quite a while. And with the spot that they're in, they're doing quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we stopped in there. We stop in there almost every time that we go to Wilton Manors, because who doesn't love a really good milkshake on a hot Florida day? So, and they have some awesome combination. I mean, The creativity in there is amazing. The different flavors of whipped cream and everything that they offer.
Yes.
So you were out of the ice cream business, and I guess you took a little break, and then Tony apparently sprung on you his new idea of what he wanted to do next. And I'm going to guess it has something to do with the address 2440.
That would be it. Progress Bar was up for sale, and that was not only just the bar, it was the building itself. Tony was always good about keeping his eye out for good property, and he had his eye on that property for a few years. Just, things didn't work out at certain times. But when this opportunity came up, we were sitting at home, and he just looked at me and he's like, "You want to own a bar?" And I was like, "You're going to have to help me." And he said, I'll help you out. So that came to fruition, and we opened up Chardees Lounge in November of 2017.
And that was open for about a year, right?
Correct. Just under a year. We had our opening weekend was, well, the first weekend we had it, we ended up, it was Progress Bar, and they already had a contract. So I actually inherited the leather ball the very first weekend. So to have that as your opening act was pretty good. And then we kind of led into the entertainment portion going into the first part of December. And at the time, Tropics had shuttered during that summer. So all of a sudden, that first weekend, it was wall to wall, and it was fantastic. We had some great entertainment. A lot of the entertainers from Tropics were there, and we intermixed some new stuff in on occasion. And then we actually did one late night show, which worked out really well. It was an entertainer called Matt Yee, and we did an 11 o'clock to about 12:30 at night show and sold that out. So we had a really good year, and again, people were sniffing around, and Tony got wind of a really good deal, and he's like, "I'm sorry, here we go again." So we ended up selling it, and then it became Listen. And then Listen lasted a little bit, and then it turned into Lit Bar.
So was Listen a gay bar or no?
It was. Two ladies owned it, and it was kind of the same format. They had, jazz singers. It was a little bit more jazzy than what we were. And then Lit went in right after them. So
yeah, and that was also prior to Progress Bar was the home of New Moon. Is that correct?
Correct.
So Carol Moran had her stamp on that building going back a while. She
had New Moon for 10, I want to say 10 years.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah. And so that's another building that's had a long history of different types of LGBTQ spaces in the same bar.
Correct.
And I know Lit Bar, about a year and a half ago or so, 2 years ago, was sold and has a new owner who also owns La Boy.
Correct. When Lit started, Lit was it was a gay bar, but it was owned by two straight guys. And it was right before the pandemic hit, or actually they got it right when the pandemic hit. They were open for 3 days, and then the state shut them down, and then they opened back up. I think that July. So they were closed for a few months, and then they sold January of 2022 to the owners of Lavoie, and basically same format, everything, and they're doing really great business. So
Yeah, Charles is a friend of mine, Charles Horton,
yes,
and I remember, he bought Lavoie, and then he bought Lit, and then he said, "Oh wow, 2 bars in 3 months," because he bought them about 3 months apart. He said, "I'm going to buy a new bar in Wilton Manors every 3 months," and now he's been on a dry spell because he hasn't found anything that was the right fit. But
you never
apparently, people
know.
love Wilton Manors enough that they want to stay there and expand their holdings. So.
Yes, yes.
So you've been there for, I guess, about 12 years now, living in Wilton Manors or in the Wilton Manors area. Um, what have you seen changing about Wilton Manors since you first visited versus now?
Um, as I said before, it still has that small town feel. You do kind of get the whiff that there's a little bit of change coming, but it's going to be slow, and I think that's the way it needs to be approached. I think that people feel safe in Wilton Manors when they go out. You don't have to worry about the rest of the world. Sometimes in the back of your mind, it's still going to be there, but every time that I go, there's a comfort level, and as we said before, it's just that small town feel. It's not like you're walking down Las Olas or downtown Miami, downtown New York. It's just completely different, and you just have this feeling of everybody's like me.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives you a good comfort level. Now, when I first moved down, I actually lived in the building where the old beer garden was.
For a minute.
I wanted to be there for 6 months just to get the feel of the town and see how everything went. Funny story, New Year's Eve 2011 going into 2012, the beer garden had been open for like 3 weeks, and I had to work the next morning, and I needed to be there at 6 o'clock. So I tried to go to sleep early, but the town was chaotic since it was New Year's Eve. It got to be midnight, and I hear a countdown, and then fireworks. It was the alibi. 15 seconds later, the beer garden does their countdown. So I'm like, are y'all not on the same clock? Everybody had to do different times. I thought it was humorous that actually happened. But it's, everybody, you were just right across the street from each other. So you knew that party was going on, and then this party was just going to keep going a little bit later. But it was nice at that time because, and again, about that time, the beer gardens, which wasn't open that long, the pub was actually under construction at that time. I remember going by and being able to kind of look in the plastic and see how they were doing all the construction at that point, and seeing how well they've done all over the years. Bill's was still in business at that time. And this was, at that point, it was right before Tony had purchased Tropic. So it was kind of Tropic's old school. The building was a little disheveled, but, the clientele was the ones that had been there for years, and a lot of them are still there.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the beer garden, and it was kind of funny to me that anybody would mention that, because in my research, it was like a footnote. It's like, oh, by the way, for 5 minutes in this building, there was a bar called Wilton Bier Garden. What was it like? Have you ever been in there? Do you remember anything about it?
It was very dark inside, and they were kind of going for a speakeasy look to it. Big booths. I can't remember if they were red or black cloth on the booths. It was very small inside, and what they were trying to do was the outside space. And the thing with outside space in South Florida is it's great during the winter, maybe not so great during the summer. And partially for the mere fact they didn't own the entire front. Part of that front is owned by the city, especially where the power grid is. So they didn't actually own the entire patio. But the beer garden itself, it was a good concept at the time. I'm gonna assume it's just the volume they couldn't get done. I don't really know how Club Extra is doing in there right now.
Yeah, Club Extra is an interesting thing too. That's another. They've been there for a couple of years though, haven't they?
The sign's been for a couple of years. I don't know exactly how long they've been open.
Yeah, I've tried to reach out to them, and hopefully I will when I get there this time. I think they're a little ambiguous about whether or not they want exposure because it's a unique venue that I don't know of another one anywhere in the country. But my understanding is it's a go-go bar for the trans community is primarily what they are. And that's something that you don't find on every street corner.
No, not at all.
So I think because of, especially with the repressive laws that are coming into play in Florida, they're a little bit timid about whether being too recognized could cause them more trouble than just laying low and, surviving by word of mouth.
Right.
Now you mentioned that Tony also owned Tropics for a while, and you were together at that time, right? When he
Correct. Yes. We got together the end of 2012. So New Year's Eve 2013, that was our first official date.
Okay. And at that time, was the entire building the Tropics bar, or was there, because I know Carol Moran had Kicks in there at one time at part of that building.
Correct. I want to say Tropics, as far as history is concerned, I think she had Kicks in there in the 90s. I want to say it was sectioned off in 3 areas. I think 4 at one point when it was originally, but Tropics just expanded over the years. And because it was 2 spots, and then it took over, I think it took over Kicks, and then it took over the patio. So by the time Tony had got it, had purchased it, it was entirely Tropics.
Okay. Now at this point in time, you are no longer connected financially to any gay bar in Wilton Manors. Is that correct?
I'm a landlord. So still own buildings, but I'm not involved in any bars at this time.
Well, that might prevent me from asking this next question, although I will ask it anyway, and you're welcome not to answer it. What's your favorite bar in Wilton Manors?
It's got to be Tropics, and it's because there's a lot of history with me in that bar. It was the first bar I walked into when I came to Wilton Manors. The story on that was I was meeting 2 friends, and because they said, just meet us there, you'll love the bar. So I got there about 5 minutes before they got there, and I opened the door, and this was 2011. The door creaked when I opened it, and everybody at the bar turned around, and the maitre d' was there, and he said, "Can I help you?" And I just put my finger up for a minute, and he just looked at me, and he said, "Can I help you?" I said, "I just had to take that in." I said, "I've never had an entire bar turn around and look at me when I walked into a bar." And 5 minutes later, my friend showed up, and the first drink that I had gotten there was served by Mike Teresi. And when my friend came in, he's like, "What do you think?" I said, "I love this place." I said, "I hope the food's just as good." And it was that night. And then, of course, me meeting Tony there. And that's where we actually met. And so it's always going to have a special place in my heart.
I see. All right then. Well, you'll be happy to know that in part one of this video series, we did a segment inside at Tropics and the back bar or side bar or whatever it is, with Jerry Halliday and Twinkie Boy. So you'll probably recognize some of the background there while I'm interviewing Twinkie Boy for the video. Apparently Jerry is also a big fan of Tropics. So,
Yeah.
well, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us a little bit about your memories from Wilton Manors. And I look forward to actually meeting you when we're in town to do part two of this video.
Sounds great.